Welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with our ideas, we combine them together, and you just listen to it in the comfort of your own home. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Before we get going, I wanted to remind everyone that you can email us if you have any questions or comments at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or add us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you want us to shout out something, if you want to have a cool idea you want us to see us use, that's where to contact us. All right, brief recap of last episode. Reed had beginning scene, which had a Comanche war tribe having just killed a bunch of people, including a child. There was a woman who was still alive, we thought might survive, might become part of the story in some way. We had Seth, which had author. What was the author's name again? I forget.
Dirk.
Dirk, who typically had been typecast as a guy who made fantastic, really powerful heroes and had everything work out really perfectly for them. And he was feeling like this might be his last book, so he's going to make something a little bit different. And then I had something based on a book I was reading, which I was reading Dune, the Butlerian Jihad. And the concept was, if you kill the messenger, then essentially you can still hide and people won't know about you, you know? So I can go into more on it later. But that's where we are today. So what do you guys have? I have Wise Old Man.
I have anti-hero.
And I have hero sidekick.
Perfect. Can I go first?
Sure.
Okay. So, Reed, I told you earlier today that I was going to kind of mix up your beginning scene a little bit.
Okay.
And you guys can tell me if this is a terrible idea. So the first chapter of Dirk's book is this grisly scene of the Comanche post-attack, post-raid, where they're doing a bunch of terrible things. I don't remember all of them, but where there was scalping, and there was killing, and there was death. And then at the very end of the chapter, there's just one word, which is cut. And then at the beginning of the next chapter, what we find out, what Dirk is writing is a story within a story, right?
Okay.
So this is not a story about the 1840s, right? This is a story about a director who is writing a story about the 1840s, okay? And he feels very strongly that there are truths and realities that have been lost to time that need to be remembered. So he is making it very, very, very violent. And he has a lot of, there's a lot of conflicting views. And he is under a lot of stress to sort of portray the story in the most accurate way possible. And that director is the Wise Old Man. His name is Charlemagne. He has some descendants. He has some lineage. This is like the 80s, I'm thinking. He has some lineage back to Comanche. And he feels really strongly that like accurate retelling of the events take place.
Cool.
Right? And so there are the themes that we'll explore in this story is not just what happened back then and the terrible things and the heroic things that happened back then, but also what happens as time moves along and realities of things kind of get skewed and the perspective of things that happened a long time ago get changed for today. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So he is a director who is, to the best of his knowledge, he's been working on this for a while. This is his final, last great movie. And this is kind of Dirk's self-insert into a book. Kind of his way of giving the middle finger to all of his critics, saying, I can do something crazy and weird. So how I'd kind of like this story to go is it cuts between what's happening in the movie that he's making as if it were the real story of something that's actually happening back in the 1840s, but then it also cuts to the issues that Charlemagne is coming up against as people try to either whitewash his history, or they try to misrepresent what he's trying to accomplish, right? In that
Mhm.
in that same way, my story element from last week is still preserved, where Charlemagne's like, I am the messenger and I need to tell this story all the way to the end, and people are constantly trying to sort of come in and change what's happening.
Okay.
So that is the wise old man.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you one of you guys want to go, or do you have any ideas?
I I have the anti-hero that I want to interject, and I have this guy. This guy will be an anti-hero in the story
Okay.
that they're telling.
Okay.
So this is this isn't a meta character. This is a
1840s character.
yeah, and
So played by an actor in this story, but you're representing him how he's represented in this
right,
movie.
right,
Okay, gotcha.
and okay, so this character, his name is Jacob Hodney, Hodney, and he's a Mexican War veteran. We closed out last week. We were saying, well, this is probably 1848, and
Right.
this was a time when the Comanche were um, raising heck in the Southwest, and then there was all the upheaval with you know the Texas War of Independence and defeating Santa Anna, San Jacinto, and then
Yeah.
President Polk. Well, as a congressman, Abraham Lincoln was critical of Polk, saying, where's the spot on the map where this thing took place? What happened
Right.
was the Mexican cavalry force attacked a company of American dragoons, and there was controversy about where it was. Well, did you pick this fight, or is this a fight that has been put on us?
Right.
And Lincoln was actually very critical of Polk, and there have been, different people have different opinions about the Mexican War, whether it was an imperialist war or whether it was just a big guy just taking the Western United States from the Mexicans because we could, kind of thing. And there was a lot. Anyway, you can read a lot of different views about the Mexican War in history.
Yeah.
But this story is taking place in 48, or at the end of the Mexican War, where our character Jacob Hodney, he had been a Texas Ranger before the war, and then got recruited by the Army to be a scout. So he worked as an Army scout during the Mexican War, and then he was discharged. And when he was working for the Texas Rangers, he had come across a piece of land that he fell in love with. And there was these flowers that grew in an arroyo there. Like in the Southwest, we'll have these gullies that will be dry most of the year, but during the rainy season, they'll sometimes actually flood. But
right, and then bloom up.
Yeah, and then, but he brought back carefully preserved a bunch of flowers, and he brought back to this Margie who he had been courting, and they fell in love and got married and started a family. And then the war came along, and he got recruited, and there was a handsome signing bonus, and
right,
and he had dreams of taking his wife and his kids, to start set up a place in this little valley that he had found, this little area that had a lot of promise. And so that's where he is. 1948. He's decked out. He's ready for trouble. He's got he's got 3 Army Colt revolvers. He's got 3 smooth bore muskets. He's got 2 rifles. He has got a shotgun and plenty of ammo, and they got some cattle, and they head out and they set up shop.
So he's not currently a Texas Ranger then?
Nope, he is retired from the Army. His friends in the Texas Rangers have said, "You're crazy. We are not going to be able to, support you or protect you out that. You'll be on your own."
Right.
But there's another little secret. Up this arroyo, there's a like a series of canyons and whatnot, and he had discovered uh, a herd of wild mustangs,
Right.
and so his goal is to run some cattle. He's got this up one of the side uh, uh, one of the side gullies along this arroyo, feeding into this arroyo, is a natural spring. So he's got year-round fresh water, and he's got a nice setup for capturing runoff when the weather brings him water, so he can do some irrigation. And along the along this gully there, some along the way had planted some peach trees. There was a grove of peach trees. It was a prime setup for somebody to just go and settle. And he was hoping to be able to meet his cash needs by selling range ponies to the Texas Rangers,
Right.
or the army, or whoever has got the deep pockets, and then be able to have a nice family. Has got boys 11 and 13, and two daughters 6 and 8, and they've got some livestock, and they've got supplies, and they're so they're setting up shop.
So this is the what story element?
He is the anti-hero, and he is setting up shop, but he's definitely in Indian territory. Where he's proposing to settle and live is in territory that is regularly visited by the Comanche.
Great.
So
is he the anti-hero? Is he an unwilling hero then?
well, yeah, he is not going looking for it, but he is, as John Wayne once said, "Well, I won't be laid a hand on. I won't be disrespected." I mean, he won't put up. Let's just say he wouldn't be a meek, turn the other cheek kind of a guy.
Yeah, I kind of see the setup for some really a really terrible revenge story.
Yep.
Yeah. Seth, you want to add in your story element, or you have some world building stuff you want to add to this?
Yeah. So, I like the story within a story idea, but again, the character I developed is also
That's totally fine. I understand that.
inside the Western story. His name is Alexander Abrams. At least that's what he goes by. And he is kind of a traveling peddler.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't stay in one place too long because he'll probably get found out for kind of the way he is. It's just kind of a swindler. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have good things from time to time, but he will, sell his own grandma snake oil. Kind of a guy.
Right. Right.
He has a partner with him, a Comanche, that kind of helps him along, kind of also plays scout for him. Not the Comanches, but the Alexander Abrams, his backstory is that he, and I guess you could say the Comanche, the Comanche goes by his christened name, John, and that's all anybody knows him by. But back when he was younger, he was orphaned, and then not John, but Alexander was orphaned, and then as he got older, kind of shanghaied into the Mexican army.
Gotcha.
However, that didn't set well with him, and at some point he deserted, and he got caught, and they were going to hang him or shoot him, one of the two. And in a daring escape, with the help of John, they both escaped execution and lived off the land for a while, and then eventually got established in their kind of traveling peddling works.
Right.
He runs gun. He sells guns to the Indians. He'll give information to the U.S. Cavalry. He's helped scout for the the Rangers from time to time, but he's also given the Rangers up to the Comanche for the right price. He's not. He's kind of a mercenary of mercenaries. He's not known to be a fighter, but also,
Right.
you know, don't push him crosswise because him and John will, you know, they'll
They hold their own.
they're loyal to each other. And they will hold their own and get themselves out of whatever situation, but you know, they're prepared to help or swindle whoever they come across. And as far as Hero's sidekick, I would think that as far as, because again, one of the things that I think Dirk is looking at in this story is that the hero doesn't have 100% plot armor, and that
Right,
the
absolutely.
presupposed idea of who the hero could be probably changes like probably 5 or 6 times. Maybe it settles with the anti-hero, or maybe, you know, he's a, you know, the last one to kind of push it, whatever it is, over the edge. But the kind of, I guess you could say, hero's sidekick persona that he holds on to is, he's not maybe a solid character through the whole thing, but every time he's helped every hero along the way, either willingly or begrudgingly.
Right.
So, you know, that horse that got, you know, one guy, you know, out of the arms of the Indians, he bought it from Alexander.
Right.
Uh, you know, that, you know, let's say
Yeah,
they
who
get surrounded
taught
in
you
the, what's that?
who taught you how to pick a lock? It was always Alexander.
Oh yeah, I was an urchin on the street, and Alexander Abrams took me in. Him and John. I mean, we broke into, you know, banks, and we, you know, yeah. So
Right.
towards the end, maybe he becomes more of a character as he gets pulled in. But his little thing is that one way or another, anyone that holds some kind of a hero role has either had a contact, and whatever skill or whatever it is was either acquired from or ends up being helped by, in the current present state, by Alexander Abrams.
Right. So here's the reality right here. Derek Dirk has dealt with a lot of people on forums and stuff with his previous books. People asking who should play, you know, should Tom Cruise play the lead character in this book that he's written? You know, should Brad Pitt play? Should we is this a Matt Damon role, right? And Derek is absolutely irritated at the whole idea.
Hmm.
As if you could take something that exists in the imagination and assign a certain actor to it and say, "Oh, that's a real Brad Pitt role."
Yeah.
So he is equally he funneled all of that irritation into this book as well, right?
Right.
So um, Charlemagne, in the process of getting this movie up and running, approached and got a contract signed by the big action movie star, right? The big action movie star, and then just took him and put him into a place of the first cavalryman that gets shot on the first charge in the first scene.
Oh, cool.
He just
So
he just filled the first charge filled with action movie stars that just like the Brad Pitts and the Tom Cruises
get killed
just
off.
getting like killed off right
Yeah.
in the very first scene. And you're like, "Oh, look at it. It's just an all-star cast and they're all coming together and they're just like getting killed as they go." And it's just like this shell shock
Yeah.
of like and that is one of the things that Charlemagne is trying to communicate is that you know, famous people, they weren't famous before they were only famous because they survived.
Yeah, I was telling you, I'm not going to spoiler alert. I'm not going to do any. I'm not going to say what it was, but I was telling you about that movie I watched the other night,
Yeah.
where they had these big stars would be in it for just a short time and then get killed off, and it was
Yeah.
like it was such a shock because this is a guy I expect to be the big star through the movie, and he
Yeah.
just like gets blown away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things that Charlemagne did. And so all the main player casts, right? All the main player roles. So like what's the name of the guy, the anti-hero read?
Jacob Hodney.
Jacob and Christopher. Christopher, that was the name of yours, Seth?
Alexander Abrams.
Alexander. Yeah, Alexander. Both of them this is their first movie, you know. So comes in with all and as this movie progresses, this is also a story about Charlemagne kind of initiating, because he's like an old director, you know, just like Derek's an old writer.
Right. And
You know, he's initiating these young people, these young upcoming stars who are going to be famous now because they're in a Charlemagne movie.
right.
Right? It's like they're famous now that they've been cast, and their entire life is different. And he, in this story, he teaches them the importance of knowing the truth and of standing witness to what happened. And like there's acting instruction, and there is constructive criticism, right? As the media, as this movie moves into production, right? As the media begins to kind of get a picture of what it is that Charlemagne is writing, and opposition begins to arise around him as people begin to sort of critique and try to pick apart his work. You know, and this is really Derek doing the same thing. Dirk doing the same thing, but he doesn't know how. He's not a very personable person. You know, he writes dialogue great, but he can never figure it out in person. So this is basically his way of saying, "Come on, guys, get off my back. Like, I'm gonna do what I want to do."
Predictable, huh? We'll show you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like one of the,
So-
I think this is great because I'd love to see, and maybe someone has already done this movie, but I'd love to see a movie where the commercial comes out and it's like exactly like what Charlemagne might do, like film all the scenes, and he's got the Brad Pitts and the Tom Cruise, and they're all together, and he has like certain scenes, and he has them do some action shots and doing some cool things, and like films a whole bunch of stuff of them doing, you know, hero-y stuff or whatever it is. But of course, as a director and the editor that might come in and, you know, they edit that out, but they'll put that stuff together for the commercial.
right.
So, like someone will be in the, you know, movie watching, you know, Jaws 24 and or Sharknado 24, whichever one is closer. And it's like, you know, coming soon to theaters near you, Charlemagne's new hit, you know, critics are raving, and it shows, you know, the Brad Pitt, you know, character, you know, fighting off some kind of, you know, zombie vampire, you know, he wins the girl. It's all like, you know, Gone with the Wind, except, you know, everyone's hair is perfect, and, you know, it's all like, you know, whatever.
Right.
And so everyone's all expecting, oh wow, it's like it's got everyone in it, and everyone's like this great hero. And it's the new Charlemagne movie, and they get there, and it's like they all get killed in the beginning, and it's all not what
Exactly.
like, and almost to the point. Now I'm not saying that this should happen in this story, but it would be like the commercial comes out, and it's like this thrilling, you know, pre-Civil War Western or something. And like 5 minutes into the movie, all the main people that you see in the commercial are dead, and it turns into like a space travel sci-fi
Yeah.
like kind of thing, and it's like, whoa, that's not what I thought this was.
Yeah. I've
That has to do that.
wondered.
We can keep it to
Yeah, I don't think that that's what this one specifically, but there are definitely elements of that, you know. Because my whole concept with this is that Charlemagne is like, he's lived a lot of his life where the messenger has been dead, and therefore he hasn't received the correct information. And it was like just recently in these last couple of years has he sort of gotten a clear picture of how things were, and so he's like, we need to write this. This is a thing we need to talk about, you know. And whether people are ready for it or not, you know, this is the pleasure of having enough money to fund his own movie, you know. It's like they will show it in theaters because I'm a famous actor and you have to listen to me. You know.
like almost one of those first full circle things. Like if someone is like first starting out and they start their own little company, let's say it's something like this, and the movie will come out and like directed by Charlemagne, edited by Charlemagne, produced by Charlemagne, and it's kind of low quality, you know, they're first starting out, but his name shows up on everything, right? Well, then he gets going, he gets big sponsors. And now at the end of his life, he's got all the money. So it's like, well, why would I want to do what the big sponsors want to do? So now it's all back
Exactly.
to, you know, produced by Charlemagne, directed by
Yeah.
Charlemagne.
Yeah. So I think that the hero is a Texas Ranger who is coming for Alexander.
Alexander is the peddler.
Yeah,
Okay, the sidekick. Okay.
Yeah, I think that the hero is a Texas Ranger that is coming for Alexander.
Okay.
Right? There's some infraction. Maybe he needs to get some information from him. Maybe he's wanted for something, And so, my thought was that he basically meets up with Jacob.
Yeah.
And then kind of doesn't convince him, but says, I'm about to head out and look and find this guy. It wouldn't be the worst thing if there was two of us.
Yeah.
And Jacob's like, oh, I'm done with that life. I've got this right here to worry about, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like nighttime, in the movie, and he's cleaning his guns, and his wife is like, whatever, the son's name, he can look after
Yeah.
them as good as anyone else.
Yeah.
And then and she kind of makes some words like, are you thinking 2 weeks or 6 weeks? As she begins to sort of pull things off the shelf and like pack him tobacco and stuff like that.
Right.
Kind of similar to, I don't know if you've seen the movie Highwaymen. It's a story about the two retired Texas Rangers who were recruited to hunt down Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
It's very good, in my opinion. It's very good. So in that same kind of vein, they kind of, the hero and then Jacob kind of leave together to go and hunt down Christopher. My brain
Alexander.
keeps saying Christopher. I don't know why. Yeah, Alexander, to find them, and there's some other bigger threat, obviously, that takes precedence.
Mm-hmm.
So, Reed, you know about history.
Okay.
What other great threat besides the Comanche? Maybe.
Well, Comanche raids, yeah, and then there's the history hates a vacuum. So now,
Right.
okay, this was Mexican land. It's now American land. However, like there was that brief rebellion out in California. You remember have you ever seen the bear flag, the Republic of California?
Yeah.
And actually, it was a totally bloodless
Bloodless
coup. Yeah, they just they went to storm the governor's palace, and he invited him into dinner, and they sat down, drank wine, and they discussed the terms, and he surrendered, and it's fine. It was kind of like, this is the way history is going. This place is getting flooded with Americans, so
this is what it is.
Yeah, it is, and but with the end of the Mexican War, trouble brewing in with polarization between the North and South, and the run up to the Civil War. A lot of people moving west and settling and minding their own business becomes a really kind of a attractive option, and
right.
So they go out, but then they've got to to deal with the marauding Indians, in this case the Comanche.
So here's how about this instead? Jacob is part of the Texas Rangers, but he has his family and he's moving out there. Right? The hero invites him to go on something, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. Like, he's very much, and then something happens to his family.
Yeah.
And then we do like a 4 or 5 year jump, and he's at his house still, and now he's just like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So then when the hero comes to recruit him, it takes a lot longer for him to come up with it, because now he's been alone. He is more of an anti-hero now.
Yeah.
He will do the right thing, but he'll do it begrudgingly, and he will probably kill people on the way.
Yeah.
And maybe the hero tells Jacob that we're going to hunt down these people, this guy who sells guns to the Comanche and stuff like that, and they get there, and then Jacob is like ready.
Yeah.
He's like, guns out, like, I'm ready. And the hero's like, no, don't, you can't. And then he reveals that what he wants to do is infiltrate or move past their area in order to do something, and he needed Jacob, because Jacob's the one who had expertise for tracking, but he couldn't tell Jacob that we aren't going to go to kill these Comanche traders. We're going to go to pay them to move us past through their like dense territory in order to get somewhere else.
Ooh, here would be a dirty twist. Here would be a dirty twist. I mean, being that in his normal books or stories, everything has a very clear right and wrong.
Right.
They're trying to find, and this kind of moves into, let's say, modern alphabet soup organizations. So with the Western expansion, gold has been found in California. With all the different tensions, they want to, because see, in 1948, or in that, just before 1948, Texas had made this is, at least this is from what I read the other day, Texas had made a treaty with the Comanche, which then the Comanche had then shifted their raiding direction south to Mexico. So what better direction than, let's say they know they want Western expansion. If they can make the treaty, but then agitate problems to get the Comanche to push south rather than to bother with their own Western expansion, well, then now they don't have to fight the Mexicans, the Comanche are. And now they don't have to fight the Comanche, the Mexicans are.
Right.
And so maybe perhaps...
Maybe this is the group of people who went to the Comanche to get them to fight the Mexicans, you know?
Right.
Maybe this guy has like this hero has like the authority to redo that treaty, and so he like, I need to get into the Comanche and I need to talk to them, you know, in order to basically say you had this deal with Texas, or you had this deal, we're going to change it now,
we'll supply you the guns, we'll supply you you know, food and supplies, and you basically keep Mexico. I mean, you know, isn't that your ancestral land, or you know, whatever it is? But yeah, I think that could be, let's say, a nice, let's say, dirty twist to it, where the good guys are, you know, they're the good guys from, let's say, the American Western expansion standpoint, but they themselves are in fact agitating this other conflict to take a different direction in order to ease pressure on their own Western expansion and settlers moving west or heading to California or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, that would work really well with the anti-hero, because he is doing the right thing, but he doesn't feel, he's not exactly happy about it, you know? He's not exactly, this isn't exactly, or, you know, I feel really bad because I'm like totally arresting his entire storyline from you, Reed. So I don't want that to be the case if you're not okay with it, but the ideas just kind of flood into my brain and then they just come straight out my mouth. So, you know, I'm just trying to like create, I'm just thinking of a movie that I would like to see, you know, a movie or a book about different people and how they kind of treat each other based on what happened to them. You know, like Hateful Eight. I was just talking to a coworker the other day. Have you seen Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's this great movie about a like roadside inn, right? Where everyone is stuck. 8 people are stuck in it's not like an inn with rooms. It's just like a big general store.
Right.
But everyone's stuck in there. It's in Montana during a blizzard. And there's a guy, he was a bounty hunter, and he's got like this really valuable bounty with him. Okay. You know, there's like an old Confederate general. There's like a black bounty hunter, and he's like, you know, pushing buttons. You know, it's like there's all these contentious things between everyone, and it's a really great, it's a great movie. You should definitely watch it. But it's just everyone brings in a different perspective and a different sort of set of motivations and emotions, and then they're all just kind of jammed into this, you know, 30 by 40 space while they wait for the storm. And if they had any ability to leave, all of them would leave, but none of them have the ability to leave.
Right. They're stuck there.
Yeah.
That's such a great, for building those complicated interactions. That's such a great
right.
story device. As you were talking, I was thinking of Key Largo,
Yeah,
the Bogey and Bacall with Edward G. Robinson
yeah,
playing like a mob boss guy, and they get stuck at Key Largo during a hurricane, and they're just stuck together.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Or I
great.
think of like Reservoir Dogs, where like the whole 90% of the movie happens in one warehouse where all of these people are supposed to come back to. And so first it's just like two guys, and then another person will come in and change the dynamic. And that's just kind of the thing I'm thinking of, where they're kind of all bound together for
Hmm.
some reason.
Yeah,
You know, um, Jacob bound to his friend, the hero. You
yeah,
know, Alexander and John bound to that because of money and because like knowing what's going on with the government, it would be incredibly valuable.
and they're figuring doing the hero a solid because they'll avoid prosecution.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So this journey of people going through an area to move towards these really violent people, the Comanche, in
Hmm.
order to basically befriend them, but not really befriend them, just kind of manipulate them to start targeting their enemies.
Right.
You know, the U.S. government's enemies, not necessarily the Comanches' enemies. Everyone's the Comanches' enemy. You know,
Hmm.
um, and through this whole thing, Charlemagne just receiving this kind of lots of pokes and prods from the outside.
Yeah.
Um, lots of people with differing opinions about how things should be represented. You know,
Hmm.
um,
And because actual history is made up of people, and people aren't always consistent, and they might have a set of moral standards, but they'll violate their own standards in under duress,
yeah,
and it, the true story is never the Pollyanna purely black and white, good guy, bad guy.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. It's that we're all barbarians at heart. Like if pushed to it,
Mhm.
So, do we want to continue this with an end cap episode, or have we kind of framed this enough that we can call this to a close? I think the movie that we don't ever hear about what happens to the movie.
Yeah.
You know,
I was thinking somewhere along the lines of like, so this is like Jacob's been stewing on this, the fact that he came home after delivering his ponies to the army and found his uh, place ransacked and his wife killed, and
right,
evidence that his children were either dead or carried off, and not, and I had this picture that uh, now 5 years later, his 13-year-old who he had left home. He took his 11-year-old with him to help bring the ponies in,
right,
but left the 13-year-old home to take care of Ma. And now he had been captured and gone renegade. And he, like the old Stockholm syndrome, like he became identified now. He's
with
a Comanche,
right,
is an
right,
18-year-old savage Comanche brave, and confronts, the great confrontation with his father. And
right.
yeah, there's a great opportunity for some storyline there.
Yeah, it has to answer the question, why weren't you there?
Yeah,
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 like how do you answer that?
right.
You know, but
Yeah, Chief so and so is my father now.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. What about you, Seth? Do you have any last points to put in this? Um I think we've pretty much it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Close the gate. Check the gate. It's a wrap.
I want to see the movie,
I know,
Yeah.
right? I
and
was thinking
and I want to watch the critics squirm because it doesn't turn out at all what anybody expected.
I know I was thinking of Daniel Day-Lewis. Either as like cuz he plays Lincoln,
Yeah,
but I was also thinking of There Will Be Blood, and I was also thinking of doesn't he also play in The Last of the Mohicans?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I thought he would be the kind of weird, not weird. Sorry, Daniel. The kind of eccentric right person to play Alexander.
Uh-huh.
Um, but anything you want to add to this, Seth, or are we wrapping it up?
I don't think so. Um, not. I mean, I think it needs to end here. Whether or
Right.
not we would need to do another one to make any other connection with the three-tiered, what do you call it? thing going on, but I don't think it's particularly necessary unless we really wanted to.
Yeah. I don't think that we need to figure out what happens at the end, because we know, according to history, what happens at the end. The Comanche are convinced to go and fight the Mexicans.
Yeah,
You know,
I heard from passing renegades that Geronimo was dead. He'd been laying down his weapons when they killed him.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you liked it, please let me know. At me on Twitter at @GetsBetterCast, or send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. If you didn't like this episode, please let me know. At me on Twitter at @GetsBetterCast, or hit me up on Gmail at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Show your friends this episode. Show your enemies this episode. And don't forget to wait, because it gets better.